"Do not let that vessel escape," Captain Lee said, his voice slightly raised. "Captain, I couldn't lose them if I tried. That ship appears to be venting various gases," the pilot replied, smoothly guiding the Asimov behind the sputtering craft. 2 centuries had passed since humanity first ventured into the stars with their FTL drives, and now they had encountered the first alien ship ever discovered. This was a momentous occasion, and the crew was tense with anticipation at the prospect of meeting extraterrestrials for the first time. If only they could persuade these aliens to stop and communicate. It was not entirely unexpected that the Asimov should come across this ship. She was built for long missions, serving as a combination of aid, rescue, transport, and protection vessel for the outermost colonies. "Captain, I'm uncertain if they're receiving our transmissions, as they haven't responded to any of our attempts. I've tried every audio and video channel I could think of, even sending mathematical symbols, but nothing," reported Rohit Singh, the communications officer. "Very well, keep at it. Let's hope they answer, and don't suddenly turn around and fire photon torpedoes at us," the captain said. "Photon torpedoes?" one of the crew asked. "Never mind, just an old joke," Captain Lee replied. "The bogey is stationary, Captain. They've stopped maneuvering and are now coasting along their last trajectory. I'm no longer detecting any engine readings, so I believe they've run out of fuel," Neve, the Canadian-born helmsman, reported. The captain knew Neve's knowledge of astrophysics, gravitational dynamics, and other topics far surpassed his own, despite her young age. Regulations had prevented her from serving on a ship until her 21st birthday, but the captain had found a way to utilize her talents as a civilian consultant. "All right, let's move in slowly, Lieutenant. Get us within 1 click, but keep above their plane," the captain ordered. "Sir, our weapons?" Commander Mathis interjected, a hint of eagerness in his voice. The captain smiled, understanding Mathis's frustration at never having the chance to use the ship's impressive armaments, beyond drills. Mathis, a Texan farmer's son, had found his place among the stars through his passion for weapons and arms. "Aim the forward guns in case they launch something. Hopefully we can intercept anything they fire at us. Prepare the primary armaments, but avoid an aggressive stance for now," replied the captain. The commander carried out the orders, suppressing his enthusiasm as much as possible. He did not necessarily want to engage the alien ship, but he also would not mind discovering the effects of 50mm explosive projectiles against their hull. Observing the vessel, Mathis suspected the main railguns would not be needed unless some form of shielding was present that they were unaware of. Mathis shook his head, wondering why anyone would venture into space in such a decrepit craft. He would not have boarded that ship even on Earth, let alone in the vacuum of space. It appeared to be cobbled together from spare parts, with exposed joints visible. "Lieutenant Singh, inquire if our new contacts require aid," the captain said. "Already done, sir." "No response," came the reply. Neve interrupted. "Sir, with or without communication, we must approach the vessel immediately. I am detecting atmosphere venting, and if they breathe oxygen like we do, they are in peril." It seemed the mission was shifting from first contact to a rescue scenario. Things were changing rapidly. They had sent a message to command when they first encountered the ship half an hour ago, but had received no response. Captain Lee decided command would likely not object to the Asimov attempting to save the aliens' lives. "Very well, we're moving in. Commander, assemble a boarding team and meet me at the main bay. Bring Dr. Chan with you. Lieutenant, dock with that vessel at the nearest airlock. Lieutenant Singh, you're with me. Everyone else, you know your duties, and you're the best crew in the ESA. I need not waste my breath." Pearson raised an eyebrow. "Captain, is it wise to go over there? What if they're hostile?" Captain Lee departed the bridge with a smile, remarking, "I'd rather be remembered as the first human shot by an alien than as the captain who remained in his chair during first contact." Pearson rolled her eyes at the bravado, then expertly docked the Asimov against the alien ship after matching its course and speed. Only a slight vibration betrayed the fact that she had maneuvered the 600-foot, 400,000-ton vessel to rest. On the last light, the flashing lights and klaxons reminded First Heddick that his ship was in grave peril. The alien ship now loomed above them, and they drifted powerless. Even if they had power, the alien ship seemed to follow them effortlessly at subliminal speed, and the last light's disabled hyperdrive offered no chance of escape. Anxiously, First Heddick rubbed the fur on his face, trying to decide what to do when Second Lytton urgently reported, "Sir, we have lost containment. We are losing atmosphere. This is very alarming." "What occurred?" Mathis inquired. The ship had suddenly gone silent and dark, mere seconds after the Asimov's boarding party had come through the airlock. Captain Lee shifted his short rifle uneasily. He was proficient in combat, but this was not his specialty. The guns were a precaution, fitted with special rounds that, in theory, should not penetrate the metal covering critical systems or pipes. The last thing one wanted to do was start a fire or create an explosion on a ship in space. However, he had no idea what kind of metal this vessel was constructed from. The 6-man boarding crew felt their bodies lose contact with the floor, as the gravity also failed. They were well trained for this, though, and each quickly collected themselves. Lee engaged the electromagnets in his armor and was surprised to feel the satisfying click of his boots against the floor. He adjusted the power setting until he achieved a somewhat normal pull against the surface. Whatever they used was at least ferrous, he thought. The crew followed his lead, and soon they were sweeping down the ship's corridors. "They appear to be quite small," Mathis complained as the team ducked their heads while making their way through the vessel. "Perhaps they are space snakes or something," Warner said over the comm. "It would be difficult to imagine snakes operating the controls we see here," Dr. Chan replied. "Well, they would have arms, of course," Warner responded. "Physiologically, I don't believe so," the doctor began before being interrupted. "Gentlemen," the captain said, "let's save the debate for later. Mr. Singh, can you decipher any of the markings we're seeing here?" Singh looked at the signs on the control panel they had come across, but despite speaking 12 languages fluently and being passable in another half-dozen, he could make no sense of the symbols. "Captain," Neve communicated, "I have no energy readings on the ship except for one area, which looks like it may be a cargo or landing bay. You are headed right toward it, maybe one level down from your current position." "Understood. That seems the wisest course. Mathis, Warner, take point. Shu, you're with me. Mr. Singh, Doctor, remain at the rear and take care," the captain said as they descended the stairs. The crew huddled behind the makeshift barriers in Bay 2. Most trembled, save for Engineer Nimmin, whose usual scowl was etched on her face, her 2 incisors bared as the clanging on the bay doors grew louder. First, Heddick hoped she would restrain herself. If Maldens were aboard, they would surely make short work of her should she foolishly attempt to engage them. His paw gripped the pulse gun as the 8 members of his crew gathered behind him. He was uncertain how effective the weapon would be. Its limited power might take down 1 or 2, but then his crew would surely be lost. Second Lytton reported the enemy hails were completely foreign, unless the Maldens had subjugated another species. His thoughts were interrupted by the groaning of the door opening slowly. In his evacuation suit, Heddick felt the temperature rising and began to pant more heavily to cool himself. In the dim emergency lighting, he glimpsed a helmeted head appear and disappear in the doorway. "Maldens," Nimmin hissed. "No," Heddick whispered. "That is not Malden armor." "What are they waiting for?" asked Second Lytton. "You think they're waiting for us?" Mathis asked, resting against the wall. "A reasonable guess. Do they truly believe we are unaware of their position behind those crates?" Captain Lee mused. "Did you get a good look, Mathis?" "No, sir, just shadows. I cannot say if they are baiting us or simply lack intelligence. We could flash bang them, then rush the position. The ship appears small with likely a minimal crew," Warner suggested. Captain Lee looked at Warner through his helmet. "That sounds rather unfriendly, doesn't it?" Warner shifted nervously. "If it's a cargo ship," the captain continued, "then they aren't soldiers. Probably just some average Joe aliens trying to make a living. Hate to wreck their day going in guns blazing." The crew looked at the captain in silence for a few minutes. "Captain, everything all right?" Pearson calmed. "You haven't moved in a while." "I'm thinking. I think slowly," the captain responded. Then he pushed himself to his feet. "What are you doing?" the doctor asked. "I have an idea," said the captain as he entered the doorway and turned on his external speakers. He managed to get out, "Greetings, we come," before he was hit by a blue splash of energy. The crew chittered quietly as the alien was lit up by the pulse from First Heddick's gun. They had killed one of the aliens that had attacked their ship. Even Nimmin had less of a scowl on her face. As the flash subsided, though, their joy turned back to fear as the giant figure remained standing. "How did it survive?" asked Second Lytton. "What is it?" "What on earth was that?" Mathis asked, pulling the captain back into the hallway. "Please tell me that was only part one of your idea." "Captain, are you injured?" the doctor asked. "What's going on down there?" commented Pearson. "They shot the captain," replied Warner. "Well, you got your wish. What is your status?" Pearson asked. "Hang on a second, everyone," the captain interrupted. Neve, if you're recording this, I'm going to need you to delete the part where I got shot from the records." "Can I do that?" Neve asked. "Probably not." "Okay, I thought maybe they might have been on the same page as far as first contact," the captain replied, as he checked his HUD, then wiggled around in his suit. Nothing." "Nothing? They shot you," said Shu. "Sir, you should have sent one of us out first." Captain Lee looked over to the security officer. She might have had a point, he thought. Mathis was the weapons expert, but Shu was the actual ground combat veteran. Having sparred with her, he suspected she would have been able to avoid getting shot at all. "Indeed, the weapon appears to be significantly underpowered," the captain remarked. "Captain, you should not dismiss it so readily. The device may target your nervous system or function in an unexpected manner," the doctor cautioned. "Well, doctor, if it takes this long to have any effect, it seems a rather ineffective weapon. However, I take your point. They may be defending themselves, but we should not risk it in case they have something more potent waiting. Warner, Mathis, use the flashbangs, then sweep left. Shu and I will take the right. Move quickly over those crates, and hopefully they understand the concept of surrender. That area is not very large, so there can't be more than a dozen of them, and likely few, if any, trained soldiers," the captain ordered. Mathis quickly retrieved his flashbangs. "Mathis," the captain said, "try not to get carried away." "What kind of pictures?" Lytton whispered. "Based on what I can see, the pictures appear to be of the aliens in the hallway outside," Nimmin replied as she took the tablet in both paws and looked at the first human anyone in the galaxy had ever seen. The other Rothla crept out of their hiding spaces to huddle around Nimmin. The creature pictured was hairless, except for a tuft on top. It was wearing clothing not dissimilar to what other species wore, at least in function, if not form. Nimmin placed a digit on the picture, and the image changed. Now there were two. The large alien was joined by a slightly smaller one. This one had longer fur on top, and Nimmin had been around enough species to understand this was a female. Then another picture showed the figure that had come through the doorway was the armored form of the aliens, confirming what she had guessed. She tapped on the screen again to see more pictures. Cities, fields, trees, collections of aliens, old and young or varying sizes and colors, playing, eating. "They are trying to communicate with us," thought First Heddick, "not attack. Perhaps they were trying to aid our ship," he thought. Finally, Nimmin tapped the screen, and pictures of the aliens right outside the bay appeared. First was one by itself, its teeth slightly bared. This was surely an aggressive posture. But why? "Quit pouting. The captain might let you blast an asteroid or something if you behave," Shu said as she guarded the doorway. "Commander," said Singh, "you have to hold still. The lighting here is not very good. I'm having a hard time getting a good shot." "Okay, that's good. I think we got everyone." "One more, Mr. Singh," the captain said as he moved over to Mathis and placed his arm around the big man's broad shoulders. "What is this one for?" Mathis asked. "Memories," the captain replied, giving the camera a thumbs up and a smile. "What is the meaning of that gesture with its digits? Is it a challenge?" Second Lytton inquired. "Do they intend to eat us?" Nimmin was exasperated. They had debated this for too long. "They are a new species. We cannot know if they bare their teeth with the same meaning as we do. Nothing they have done so far suggests they are aggressive. They have not fired on our ship, nor did they shoot us when we shot one of them." "The door was broken open," a crew member cried, nearly in tears. She was a tan-colored member from one of the northern city-states, recently brought on as a cook. "Perhaps they thought we needed help, as this ship was about to disintegrate," Nimmin replied. First Heddick was deep in thought, replaying the events of the last hour in his mind. Finally, he stood up as the crew looked on. "What are you doing, sir?" Second Lytton asked, panicked. I think I know what the alien was trying to do, First Heddick replied. To the crew's shock, he began climbing over the crate. Captain, you'll want to see this, Shu said. The crew hurried forward for a view into the bay. Atop the wall of crates, a small creature about 4 feet high was climbing down from the makeshift barricade. It landed with a soft thump, then turned towards the doorway. Wearing a suit and a partially obscured helmet, the creature's face was covered in fur, with impossibly bright blue orbs shining from 2 large eyes set more to the sides than the front. 2 short snouts were in the middle of the face, below the eyes, and a slightly curved mouth sat below that. Stocky in appearance beneath the suit, it moved with a few halting steps towards the door. Wow, a space bear, Warner said. Then its mouth gradually curved upwards, revealing short rows of flat teeth. What is it doing? Smiling? The doctor wondered. First Heddick had no idea what to make of the situation. Typically, Rothla and most other species only bared their teeth as a sign of aggression or challenge. Yet here he was facing huge armored aliens, his own teeth exposed. He could only hope he had interpreted their intentions correctly. Suddenly, one of the aliens emerged from the hallway. He couldn't tell if it was the one he had shot, as they all appeared the same to him. It extended both of its upper limbs as it slowly approached First Heddick. Behind the crates, the crew of the Last Light was on edge. Second Lytton chittered nervously over the comm. Sir, should I shoot him if he attacks? That was remarkable, Pearson communicated, watching through the feed from the captain's armor. Captain Lee agreed, but his next move had to be the right one. They were making progress, but it was slow and could be easily derailed. Finally, he settled into a seated position. The boarding crew looked on at the unusual scene. Should we come out? Mathis asked. Not yet, Captain Lee said quietly. I believe we need to maintain a slow pace. Why are you sitting down? Did I miss the class on xenorelations? Mathis inquired. Mathis, said Singh. The captain has the right idea. Our size is likely intimidating to them. I imagine any species understands that a larger creature should be approached with caution. On your farm, would you rather approach a bull that was standing up facing you or laying down? I'm afraid I wouldn't know, Doc, as we grew tomatoes. But yeah, I'd rather face a tomato laying down. The large alien was sitting on its hindquarters, its lower limbs crossed in front of it. First, Heddick began to lose his fear, but his suit felt uncomfortably hot. Second, is the containment holding? He asked. Yes, sir. With the reduced drain on the power, the bay is stable now, but the rest of the ship is still dead, Second replied. It's not my fault, Nimmin said. I told you we needed to repair the generator before we left. No one said it was your fault, Nimmin, Heddick said. They had atmosphere, and that was good, thought Heddick as he activated the release on his helmet. As the clamps opened, he slowly took off the helmet and felt a rush of cooler air. He panted quickly, trying to cool himself. Then he set down the helmet and gathered his courage again. Walking slowly over to the giant who, even sitting, was almost as tall as he was, Heddick extended a paw and slowly drew it over the helmet of the alien in the Rothla gesture of greeting. The alien bared its teeth again, causing Heddick to tense. Suddenly, the creature withdrew its teeth, and Heddick relaxed. Don't tell me to relax, Mathis. I can't see what's happening. The alien is right in front of the camera, and I'm not getting good resolution through your cameras, Pearson communicated. Shu, please inform Pearson of the situation, Mathis said, a hint of amusement in his voice. For the official record, Captain Lee, the decorated commander of the Asimov, is the first human in history to be petted by an alien space bear. Neve, Mathis continued, I trust you captured that. The captain surveyed the bay. 9 furry aliens, standing about 4 feet high and wearing what could be described as spacesuits, had their helmets scattered around them. Despite the open doors to the hallway, the bay maintained its atmosphere, suggesting a containment field of some kind that would require further examination. Gravity was also active, though at only 0.7 G. It had taken another hour of deliberate actions before the Asimov crew and the aliens were all finally out in the open. By that time, their oxygen supplies were running low, necessitating the retrieval of spare tanks. This promised to be a lengthy process as no one could remove their helmets due to concerns about potential pathogens. The aliens seemed unconcerned, mingling amongst themselves. One, named Hedek, was currently allowing the doctor to examine it, having removed its suit to reveal a long, blue, sleeveless, smock-like covering. Hedek's body was covered in the same fur as the others, with long, pointed ears topped by a tuft of white. The rest of the crew had various shades of fur, including the one sitting with Singh, whose fur had a mottled coloration. Captain Lee surveyed the scene. They had made first contact at last. Lee had spent his entire childhood looking up at the stars, wondering if they were out there. In school, his parents had been somewhat concerned by his focus on those subjects that would qualify him for ES. His dogged pursuit of getting into space came at the expense of everything else. Friends, like Matis, only came into his life if they shared the same goal of reaching space. He wasn't even aiming for command. It had come to him as a consequence of his tireless work ethic and good instincts. In truth, he simply wanted to see the galaxy and would have done it as a cook if he needed to. He needed to know if those boyhood dreams could be realized, if the stars he traced night after night would ever reveal their prize. And now they had. The enormity of the moment came over him, and Captain Lee found it was a little harder to breathe in his armor. The small, dark alien was first to speak. History was about to be made, thought Captain Lee. I would like to begin by first offering my most sincere apologies for defecating on you, it said through the translator. Captain Lee looked quickly over to his communication officer as Pearson did her best to stifle a laugh. Only a small, distinctly unceremonious snort escaped her. The alien looked puzzled by their reaction. Singh held up a finger in the air without looking away from the machine. In my defense, the two words are very similar in their language. I think. Okay, it should work now. Singh gestured at the alien, who seemed to understand what he was getting at. I would like to begin by first offering my sincere apologies for shooting at you, the alien said. On behalf of the crew of the Last Light, we express our gratitude for your timely arrival, it continued. I am Captain Lee of the starship Asimov, representing Earth and its colonies. We are honored to meet you and your crew. This is a significant moment in our shared history. The people of Earth and its colonies would be delighted to extend the hand of friendship. Neman, undeterred, stepped forward to address the alien captain. While First Hedek is an able commander of this freighter, the officials you should speak with are on our home planet. I've spent much of the day trying to familiarize your crew with our universal translator, leaving little time for ship repairs. The alien made a low, rumbling sound that the translator could not interpret, though it seemed to convey amusement. Forgive us, Neman. We were so eager to meet you that I neglected to consider your distance from home. Of course, we will provide any assistance you require. My navigator, Neve, will be invaluable in helping you return. First Hedek motioned to another Rothla, who nervously approached and ushered Neve away. As for your ship, my engineer, Mr. Peterson, will do what he can to assist you, Captain Lee said, gesturing to an alien at his side. First Hedek, would you mind staying with me? I have many questions that cannot wait. Neman was pleased by this request and began to prepare her suit and tools. First, Hedek led the captain to a semi-private area where he had the crew prepare a more comfortable space. I apologize for the accommodations. The rest of the ship still has no power, First Hedek said, smoothing his fur, a nervous habit Captain Lee had observed before. Captain Lee gently lowered himself, feeling the ache in his muscles and the light bruising from the weapon's impact, despite his armor. First Hedek seemed to notice and looked down contritely. Please, First Hedek, I am fine. Your weapon caused no significant damage, just some slight discomfort, Captain Lee reassured him. The little alien's expression turned to one of shock. Discomfort? Captain, that would have killed most species, and those who survived would have suffered serious injury. Captain Lee replied, I'll have my commander and doctor figure that out. What I'm more curious about, though, First Hedek, is the other species you mentioned. How many species are there from your home? I'm not sure of the exact number, but I've personally interacted with more than 24. However, our cargo operations are limited to a small sector, so I'm certain there are many more. First Hedek replied. Captain Lee took a deep breath. Numerous species, he thought. It seemed there was an entire galactic civilization that humans were not part of. First Hedek tilted his head, his ears shifting slightly. Captain, you appear surprised. May I inquire how many species your people engage in trade with? First Hedik asked. First Hedik, you are the first alien species any human has ever encountered in our 2 centuries of space exploration. We've had reports of aliens visiting our planet and abducting some of our people, but those have typically been dismissed as stories from delusional individuals, Captain Lee said. Now it was First Hedik's turn to take a deep breath. He had never before encountered a species so isolated. Typically, by the time a species developed FTL travel, they had been contacted by at least one of the other spacefaring races. Captain, where is your homeworld? When our FTL drive malfunctioned, we were thrown far off course, and in our attempt to escape your ship, I did not have time to determine our position. First, Hedik said. Captain Lee pulled out a data pad and tapped a few times before handing it back to First Hedik. If you press here, you can see a larger view, but this is our planet Earth. First Hedik took the pad in his paws and looked at the blue disk. He was surprised by the amount of water on the planet, if that was indeed water. He tapped the screen to get a larger view, trying to determine their location. Finally, the view expanded enough that he could see a familiar galactic formation. His tongue fell out of his mouth and he looked at the alien captain. Captain, your map must be mistaken. You cannot be from here. This is a dead zone. After the initial meeting, Pearson had repositioned the ship, bringing the airlock closer to the cargo bay where the Rothla were. This made it easier for the Asimov's crew to come and go as needed, though it also drew a fair number of curious onlookers. That's a space bear, Warner replied. At 25, he was the youngest on the crew aside from Neve, having recently joined the Asimov after completing his military service on Earth. His family had been financially limited, and he had seen enlistment as a way to see the world. His first assignment was at a base near the SpaceX launch facilities in Florida, and like many others, he had caught the bug to venture into space. While he lacked the qualifications for the ESA, he was a capable soldier who had talked his way onto a freighter's security detail. Captain Lee had recognized his skills when they met, and Shu had taken some convincing, feeling he was too young, but ultimately agreed. The two of them provided security for the Asimov and its crew of 50, though there was little for them to do on that front, so they often lent a hand with other duties as needed. Prior to this, their main action had been helping to separate some feuding miners on an asteroid during a dispute over mining rights. Look at the ears. Bears have small, rounded ears, while theirs are taller and pointed. And the noses, how can you not see the resemblance to a pig's snout? Shu said. All I know is that when we get back to a base, I'm going to make a killing selling stuffed versions of these things. Alien Space Bears is going to sell a lot better to the kids than alien fox pigs, Warner replied. I doubt you'll be doing that anytime soon, though. Command told us to hold tight. They're sending the Le Guin out to meet us. But otherwise, we're on lockdown. I don't think news of this is going to get out for a while, Shu said, watching the Rothla move about the cargo bay. With the remainder of their vessel disabled, the diminutive aliens endeavored to make the bay as comfortable as they could. The Asimov had assisted by providing sterilized pillows and blankets, which the Rothla incorporated into small, nest-like structures on the floor. How long do you think they'll keep this under wraps? People will want to know about this. I'd want to know if I was on Earth or the colonies, Warner said. Who knows? They'll likely want to extract as much as they can from these beings before potentially reaching out to their government or whatever equivalent they have, Warner replied, his shoulders sinking slightly. Neve finished downloading the ship's records from the data Second Lytton had provided, the small alien visibly anxious throughout the process, but managing to furnish what she needed. As she prepared to depart, Neve noticed one of the Rothla sitting alone in a corner of the bay, its fur a lighter, almost blonde hue. It appeared melancholy to her untrained eye. Approaching slowly and speaking softly, as her experience with Lytton had taught her, Neve introduced herself. Hello, my name is Lindsay Neve. My friends call me Neve. The Rothla, dressed in a gray smock similar to the others, looked down without meeting her gaze. My name is Varro, came the softer, more Nimon-like voice from the translator. It's nice to meet you, Varro, Neve said. Why are you over here by yourself? I am merely a cook, Varro replied, but the kitchen is not working, so I have nothing to do. Can't you help with the work your friends are doing? Varro shook her head. I would only be in the way. I cook for the crew, but they do not like me to interfere in anything else. Some believe Aram should not be on ships at all. Neve cocked her head. What is Aram? Varro looked around before speaking. On our planet, my people are from the north. We are called Aram. Other Rothla sometimes do not like Aram because we are not smart, so they want us to stay out of the way. Where are your people from? I was too far away to hear your leader speak. Sadness swept over Neve as she studied the little alien. Billions of miles away, and some things in the universe were all too familiar. We call ourselves human. Our home planet is called Earth. I come from a part of Earth called Canada. It's in the north too, so we have something in common. This seemed to reassure Varro, and she shuffled a little closer. Are you an elder of your people, Neve? I have never seen humans before. I am only 39 cycles old, and sometimes they tease me for being so young. I understand. I'm also the youngest on our ship. Sometimes they tease me too. How did you end up on this ship, Varro? First Heddick came to our colony and found me there. He is a kind Rothla and let me join the crew. Do you have a family? Neve asked. Varro clasped her paws together and seemed to grow even smaller. My family, they were part of the colony. There were 5 in my litter and my parents. We had an agricultural license. But that is all gone now. The Malnid came and told the colonists that they did not have permission to be on the planet. The Malnid do what they always do. We tried to hide when it started, but they found us, my brothers and sisters. I ran into the woods to escape. They burned the colony. I came back when they left, but there was nothing left. I am unsure if I should hope they are alive, for the Malnid do not treat prisoners kindly. Neve's eyes glistened momentarily. Varro, what can you tell me about the Malnid? Varro paused. You are unfamiliar with the Malnid? He asked. Then you are fortunate, Nev. They are known to all. The Malnid control much in this galaxy. All species fear them. They move from world to world, taking as they please. Our people always provide what they demand, hoping the Malnid will leave us be. Sometimes they do, but at times they are cruel. They were cruel when they came to my colony. Why do you not fight them? Neve inquired. The Rothla are not skilled in war, Neve. When we try to resist, it only angers the Malnid, and they burn our cities and kill our people, even the young. We cannot defeat them. It is better to give them what they want. At least then they allow us to live, as long as we pay their collectors. Even so, they do as they will. The Malnid know warfare well. I hope your people never encounter them. Neve gently took Varro's paw in her gloved hand. Varro, I have a secret to share with you. A secret? Varro's eyes widened. That is like a hashun. Yes, please. What is the secret? Neve leaned in closer. Humans, she whispered, are quite adept at war. That appears to be the case. It explains why we've encountered no one for such an extended period. Evidently, we've evolved in a remote, inhospitable sector of the galaxy, where First Heddick believed no intelligent life should have ever developed. The high background radiation, scorching stars, and planets with extreme gravitational conditions made this region seem unsuitable for life to thrive. As the captain noted, the galaxy may have effectively abandoned us when we were still in our most primitive stages, struggling to master the most basic tools. Dr. Chan expressed a desire to conduct a more thorough examination of our new acquaintances, as their biology appears to differ significantly from our own, despite the underlying similarities. While they could potentially survive on Earth, the gravity and atmospheric differences would likely cause them considerable discomfort and impairment. Salad? Are they vegetarians? No doubt their stature is more diminutive, Matas said with a chuckle. And a bit sluggish as well, added Peterson, the chief engineer. The older man sat with his hands clasped in front of him, leaning back on the rear legs of his chair. His shiny head retained only a few tufts of white hair, which he rarely bothered to comb. They seemed to move well enough for their size, Captain Lee observed. Nah, not that kind of slow. I mean, slow in their thinking, Peterson replied. Can you elaborate? Dr. Chan asked, noting that if Peterson felt the creatures were slow, it must hold some significance, given the engineer's own unhurried manner. Well, I was assisting that one alien, Niman, I believe she is female, in the engine room. Apparently, whatever they use for power had suffered a malfunction, still producing but not distributing to the systems. From what I could gather, they had overtaxed the device, and it was barely holding together. As she was explaining to me how it all worked, I could see fairly quickly that rerouting a couple of components to bypass the damaged conduits would solve the issue. I don't claim to fully understand their technology, but the basic principle is, you have a power source that needs to be directed appropriately. If whatever is damaged, you need to find an alternate path. She didn't realize that? Matis inquired. No, not to say she couldn't have figured it out. When she was describing the system, it was clear she knew what she was talking about. But for some reason, when faced with a complication, she seemed to struggle with the adjustments. Once I pointed out a potential solution, it was as if a light went on for her. Not that I'm calling them unintelligent, mind you, Peterson clarified. These humans must be rather simple-minded, Nimmin murmured as she gently groomed her fur. Why do you say that? Second Lytton asked. He was currently assisting her with some tests. With the humans' help, they had restored power and containment to the rest of the ship, and he was relieved to no longer need to wear their suits. I was speaking with their engineer about spacecraft, and did you know that these humans used explosives to first venture into space? She asked, reviewing the results. I believe your translator misheard. No species would do that. Everyone masters anti-gravity before attempting space travel. Second Lytton replied. My hearing is fine, Second. I know what I heard. The creatures are utterly reckless, strapping themselves onto what he called rockets, giant tubes filled with flammable fuels. Even today, they don't use containment fields on their ships, relying only on the vessel's walls to keep their atmosphere contained. It's unbelievable they ever made it to space at all. Second Lytton looked around nervously. He couldn't imagine traveling through space with nothing but metal walls for protection. Anything less than full containment would be suicide. What kind of ships were they using? It's basically a piece of junk, Peterson continued. They depend on their containment fields for nearly everything on the ship. That's why the construction looks so shoddy compared to ours. Once they get the containment field running, they don't worry as much about the exterior, since the field serves as the primary structure. Their engineering tolerances are far beyond what we would accept. I'm not saying I saw actual holes, but in some places it seemed awfully close. The Asimov's hull is probably 4 to 5 times thicker and much better assembled. Is this common with other species? Pearson asked, having joined the meeting late, insisting they confirm the right course first. Neve usually handled that quickly, but she had asked to stay on the first light and assist one of the aliens. Common? Hell, it seems to be the only way everyone else got into space. Nimmin looked at me like I was crazy when I started talking about our old rockets. That's why it took them so long. They picked the lock to discover space travel while we kicked down the door. Eventually, they get through, but it took them thousands of years to do what we accomplished in just a few hundred. I agree, I wouldn't rely on the fields, but as a backup measure, they definitely have their uses, Captain Lee commented. I think it's doable with their help. From what I last heard on the subject, we were getting closer to a practical solution, but having a working unit would be a significant step, I'd have to assume, Peterson replied. Anyway, their engine and hyperdrive are still out, and I told her I would get back and help her. I just wanted to come back here to get some equipment and give you a report, Peterson added. Thanks, Mr. Peterson. Has anyone seen Singh? Captain Lee asked. He's on the bridge, Lieutenant Pearson said. He's trying to get one of their translators hooked up to our comm system. Last I left him, he was muttering about phonemes or something. He said he would come down soon. Captain Lee knew his communication operator well and understood that soon might mean a few hours. Once Singh found something interesting, he didn't let go easily. You eat other living things? Varro asked with shock, nearly dropping the container in her hands. Neve felt a flush rise in her cheeks within the confines of her suit. They were in the kitchen of the last light now that the ship was powered up again, but the doctor had said they had to remain in their suits. Varro was preparing food for the Rothla crew, who had been subsisting on emergency rations for the past couple of days while trapped in the cargo bay. Well, just the ones that can't talk. We wouldn't eat you, Neve said, trying to alleviate the situation. What do you eat? Varro regarded her for a moment. Usually, Neve would smile in a situation like this, but she had learned that you didn't show your teeth to the Rothla. Your people are very strange, Neve, Varro said. I think you are the first predator species that we have ever befriended. We usually try to stay far away from them. Rothla only eat plants. We also eat lots of vegetables too, Neve said hopefully. What are you making? This is the captain's favorite. It is basu root and nallet, Varro replied. Neve looked at the mixture in the bowl. The basu root we pour into the pan and cook it, and then we throw in some nallet, Varro said, producing some very dark round berries. Neve smiled. Space pancakes, she thought to herself, as she watched the yellow-furred alien move around the kitchen. Given that the kitchen was designed for Rothla, Neve felt somewhat like a giant navigating the space, mindful not to inadvertently disturb anything. She had to admit Varro seemed to know what she was doing. The Rothla appeared much happier now that she had her kitchen back. They had spent a lot of time talking about the things they had seen in space during the few hours it took to get the rest of the ship back online. Varro proved that she was far from stupid, being very observant, and Neve thought she might have gained more useful information talking to her new friend than she got from the data from Second Lytton. The little alien seemed able to recall things in astonishing detail. Compared to Varro's experiences, Neve felt she had little to offer. Humans had only colonized a few worlds, and the wonders Varro had described, ringed planets with tree-sized flowers, eclipsed the pink clouds of Valhalla that had once amazed her. Neve, could you get me the bowl behind you? Varro asked. As Neve reached for the shelf, the ship lurched, violently knocking her off her feet. 3 ships, Captain. They've hit us and are now fleeing, Lieutenant Pearson reported as the crew scrambled to their posts on the bridge. They'd had only seconds of warning before the impact. Hail them with the translator, Mr. Singh. Commander Mathis, scan those ships, Captain Lee ordered. Lieutenant Pearson, any damage? Minor reports. I can't keep up with them and fly at the same time. We need Neve here, Lieutenant Pearson said, accelerating the ship away from the unknown assailants. Aye, but we're still attached, Captain. We can't fight back while towing another ship like this. We'll worry about that later, Captain Lee said. Brace for impact, crew, Commander Mathis ordered as the ship was rocked by multiple blasts from the Malnid ships. First, Hedek was almost thrown off his feet again as the pulse cannons from the Malnid attack cruisers raked over the Asimov. He could not see the blast strike, but he felt their impact as the human ship's hull absorbed the force and transferred the shock to the last light. Then he saw the 3 Malnid ships streaking off. All crew, don your evacuation suits at once, he ordered over the ship-wide comms as he worked to secure his helmet. He couldn't tell how much damage the Asimov had taken, but he had to believe it was severe. 1 Malnid ship was bad enough, but the firepower from 3 was a match for anything in the galaxy. The last light could offer no help, as she carried no weapons, which was not allowed by the Malnid. All he could do was try to help his people survive, and hope the Asimov had some teeth. Suddenly he felt a slight shudder through his feet. As he looked up, he saw the Asimov undocking. They are leaving us! His heart sank, yet he felt no anger, only sadness. The humans had felt the power of the Malnid, and now understood why the galaxy lived in fear of them. He did not blame them for running. He would have done the same. The last light was a crippled ship and would only slow them down. He turned away from the viewport as the 2 ships separated and began to make his way to the stairwell. He was the first, and they would need him in the short time they had left. Sir, the officer shouted, they are not fleeing. They are headed straight for us and are accelerating. Someone on that ship believes they have the Fang and the Claw to go against 3 Malnid warships. Good. We have gone far too long without sport. Officer Palat, break off and secure the Rothland ship until I get there. We will discipline these poor brave fools, Alpha Tolan said. The alien ship was tough, but their pulse cannons should have wreaked havoc on their containment fields, he thought. The fight would be over quickly. The Malnid ship's snarl broke off from its sisters as the unknown ship bore down at them. The Snapjaw was left to assist the Alpha's Longclaw. Officer Palat shook his head at the stupidity of whoever was in charge of the ship flying to its death. How are we doing? Captain Lee asked. Minor injuries being reported, Captain. Mostly cuts and bruises from being thrown around. The, systems are, we seem. Sorry, sir. I'll have it in a minute. The crewman responded. We'll get that later. Mr. Peterson, he asked over the comm, how are we doing for power? We're fine down here, sir. You have everything the Asimov can give you, came the reply. Commander, the weapons? Captain Lee asked. Point guns are loaded, railgun is online and primed. Please don't tell me that we're going to send them pictures. Matis responded grimly. Not this time, Commander. Commander, note for the record that the Asimov was fired upon without provocation by an unknown hostile force while peacefully rendering aid to an alien ship in distress. All hails to the attackers have gone unheeded. The Asimov is now defending itself and its newfound friends. Now that we have satisfied the lawyers, Commander, weapons are free. You may fire at any target of opportunity, the captain said. Commander Mathis nodded and turned his attention to the weapons controls. The two turret-mounted 50mm cannons were capable of firing 6,000 rounds a minute. The Asimov carried 100,000 rounds thanks to generous discounts offered by the arms manufacturer on Earth. These smaller guns were overshadowed by the railgun the Asimov carried. That weapon fired 10-kilogram shells, accelerating the hardened ammunition to 30 kilometers at a rate of 2 each second. He could control them all from one of 3 fire control stations built in the ship, another redundant safety feature. Light exploded from the outriggers of the 2 alien ships before the Asimov could get into range of its own guns. Latour's Pearson was ready for them this time, though, and without the last light holding them back, she had the Asimov on an erratic approach, constantly changing her vectors and not giving the alien ships an easy target like they had before. One blast caught the Asimov on its hull, but the other shots flashed by harmlessly. Finally, the light blinked on his screen, alerting Commander Matis that he was in range. The targeting computers locked onto his selected targets, and he felt the satisfying click as he fired the cannons first. The railgun then swiveled, and he thought he could feel the soft thump under his feet as it fired. Alpha Tolan watched in shock as the ship approached, darting more quickly than anything he had ever seen. It was as large as the Longclaw, but was obviously much more agile. Though its hull was scorched and damaged after taking 2 full volleys from the 3 Malnid ships, it still seemed fully operational. We have multiple sensor readings, Alpha. They are extremely small, the officer called out. How many, he demanded as he watched the tiny flickering lights suddenly appearing. Thousands, the officer started before he was cut off by hundreds of explosions, lighting up the hull of the Longclaw. Pieces of the hull were ripped apart by tiny, invisible projectiles. Chaos erupted on the bridge as emergency warnings began blaring. Alpha, multiple hull failures are being reported. One section of the hull is completely gone, an officer shouted. 2 large explosions then rocked the Longclaw as the alien ship flew by, throwing the crew out of their seats and sending blinding flashes of light across the length of the ship. Turn the ship, all power to the containment fields. What happened? Did another ship attack us? Alpha Tolan demanded over the din. No, sir. It came from that ship. It's turning. The crew of the Longclaw had only a microsecond to react as the tiny lights rippled from the alien ship again, until explosions splashed against its hull, wreaking havoc on the metal. Any alarms that were not already sounding added themselves to the chaos. Do we have containment? Alpha roared. The question became moot as the bridge split apart in a blinding explosion. Alpha Tolan could only watch helplessly as the bridge was suddenly exposed to the harshness of outer space. As his blood boiled in the vacuum, his last thoughts were of the dark gray ship as it flashed by, and he briefly wondered what the symbols ASIMOV meant before his world went black. The Asimov broke away from the alien ship as it tore itself apart. Well done, Commander Lieutenant Pearson. Mr. Peterson, I know we took a few shots from the other ship, and we're pushing the Asimov pretty hard. Are we holding up down there? Captain Lee asked. We lost something taking those last few hits, Captain. I'll figure it out later, but all major systems are operational, Peterson replied over the comm. Captain, the remaining ship is behind us, veering away but still firing, Lieutenant Pearson reported. Close that gap, Lieutenant. Their guns may be weaker, but they have a longer range, Captain Lee said as the ship rocked from a few more shots. They got a good head start as we passed by. We'll have to push it, and we'll be less maneuverable at those speeds. They'll probably get a few more hits before we catch them, if we do, Lieutenant Pearson responded. Neve's head was throbbing as she picked herself up from the floor. She felt something running down her face and put her hand to her head. She pulled her fingers back and saw blood on the tips. Suddenly, she realized that her helmet had broken. "Varro! Varro, where are you?" she yelled over the alarms blaring throughout the ship. Varro bore a nasty gash on her side. Her fur darkened to an almost black hue. Neve grabbed a cloth from the floor and did her best to stem the bleeding. She tied several cloths together to create a makeshift bandage. Though lacking formal medical training, Neve knew she had to stop the flow of blood. She thought Dr. Chan would have to handle the rest, as she slowly lifted Varro and made her way to the hallway. The alien felt surprisingly light in the reduced gravity. "Dr. Chan, are you there?" she called over the comm, met only with silence. "Captain? Pearson? Is anyone there? Varro needs the doctor." The comm must be damaged, she realized. She would have to return to the Asimov herself. "Back to Bay 2, First Heddick ordered, his small crew filtering into the halls. "Evacuation suits on." Second Lytton hurried up, asking, "What happened? The engine was stable." "Malnid," First Heddick replied. 3 attack ships." Lytton's voice trembled with fear. "What of the Asimov? Can they protect us?" Heddick placed a paw on Lytton's shoulder. "We are alone, Lytton. They fled. They had no choice. We must help the others. Where is little Varro?" "I have not seen her. I think she was with the human," Lytton said, dread rising. "If the powerful humans had run away, what hope did they have? Gather the others. We need to find a place to hide. Meet me near the engine room. I don't think the Malnid will destroy the ship, but if they return, they'll try to board us. I'll find Varro. If the Malnid board and I'm not there, you take the crew someplace safe. If they find you, hold them off as long as you can." Heddick handed the pulse gun to Lytton. What if I lose my nerve?" Lytton asked. "Keep the crew alive, Second. If you feel surrender is the better option, you will have done your duty. There would be no shame in that," Heddick said, disappearing down the hall. Neve paused in the hallway, uncertain of her next steps. The ship seemed small enough when the lights were on, but now with the hallways dark and the alarms sounding, she felt disoriented. Bay 2 should have been down this hallway, but she had run into a dead end near a supply room. Varro was still not moving, and Neve felt helpless as her friend seemed to grow lighter by the minute. Then the ship shuddered once more. A loud shearing noise vibrated through the metal. Had something happened to the Asimov? Neve turned down another unfamiliar hallway and nearly cried out as a furry bundle slammed into her. First Heddick was knocked back, slamming hard against the wall. "First Heddick, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you," Neve said. First Heddick rubbed his head with one paw. "Varro?" he said as he saw the Rothla. "What happened?" he asked. "I don't know. She's hurt. We have to get her back to the Asimov so Dr. Chan can help us. She's lost a lot of blood," Neve replied. "I'm afraid we can't," First Heddick said sadly. "The Malnid attacked us. Your ship is gone." "Gone? The explosion?" Neve tried to process the words and suddenly felt very weak. The human stood very still and then slumped a little. First Heddick tried to steady her, but her weight was far more than he could bear, and she almost fell on top of him before righting herself. He looked at her with sadness as tears escaped her eyes. She was Rothla in some ways, despite being so different, he thought. "Come, Neve, if those sounds are what I think they are, the Malnid have cut through our hull and will be boarding. We need to get someplace safe," he said, trying to lead her towards the engine room. As they made their way in the dim light, he could hear her sobbing, and yet she carried on, holding Varro as if she were but a toy. He felt for the human. To be alone without your people was something the Rothla feared more than anything. But there was little he could do to comfort her now. As they rounded a corner, he halted abruptly and extended his arm, signaling Neve to stop. "Malnid!" Several of them had taken up positions in the hallway, with more pouring through the breach in the hull. Each wore armor and carried a pulse rifle. There would be no fight, only surrender or worse. First Heddick bowed his head. There was nothing to be done now. They could hide in the ship for a time, but that would only delay the inevitable. "I am sorry, Neve. The Malnid are here. I fear your people have chosen the wrong species to befriend. I will offer myself to them and pray that you and my crew might yet live." "Varro?" Neve asked. First Heddick shook his head. He knew the Malnid had no sympathy for the injured. Even if the rest were taken prisoner, Varro would be vented from an airlock. Neve looked at the small figure in her arms and sighed. Intellectually, she knew Varro was similar in age, but her friend's diminutive stature made it easy to see them as much younger. The Rothla's Disney-esque design did not help. Neve's protective instincts were in overdrive. Varro had already lost so much, and Neve refused to let the Malnid take any more. "Is it possible to adjust the ship's gravity?" she asked, an idea forming in her mind. "Yes, we can do that. Sometimes we need to accommodate other species if we take on passengers. There is a control room we passed on the way here," First Heddick said, looking at her through his helmet. "Lead the way," she said. The Rothla led her to the closet-sized room. As he opened the panel housing the controls, Neve gently laid Varro down on the floor. She checked her breathing and satisfied herself that her friend was still alive, but not for much longer unless she could do something to help them. "Neve, I'm prepared. What would you like me to do?" First Heddick asked. "I need you to turn the gravity up on the ship. Humans live with higher gravity. If I'm going to have a chance against the Malnid, I'll need that advantage." First Heddick nodded and turned the controls. He began to feel the effects of the gravity and looked over to Neve, waiting for her to give him the cue to stop. As the gravity went higher, Neve started to feel a bit more normal. She wasn't sure exactly what Earth normal would be, but when it felt familiar, she nodded to First Heddick. First, Heddick looked at the controls and felt his own weight pressing him into the floor as he struggled against the higher gravity. The human simply stood tall in the room, taking deep breaths and hopping up and down. "Neve, you'll require assistance. Allow me to accompany you," First Heddick said with some effort. "No," she said. "You need to stay here and help Varro. Now can you keep the gravity at that level in the rest of the ship and put it back to your standard gravity in this section? I don't think it will be good for her injuries." First Heddick nodded and made the adjustments, feeling relief as the gravity went down. The human leaned down and pressed her face against Varro's fur. First Heddick watched this gesture and wondered how an alien could show an Aram more kindness than some of his own people. Then he wondered if this would be the last time he would see her. "Wish me luck," she said as she straightened up, clipping Varro's translator to her suit. "But you have no weapons," he said. "I'll get one," she replied as she closed the door. "Neve, wait," he tried to say, but she was already gone. "They're gone, Captain. They jumped," Lieutenant Pearson said as the Malnid ship blinked out of space. "Let them go." "Where's the last ship?" Captain Lee asked. "I've got them back at the last light, Captain," Welker replied from the navigation console. "This took too long. We shouldn't have chased this one. Get us back there, Lieutenant Pearson. Don't spare the engines. Burn them out if you have to. Mr. Singh, try and hail the last light. Let them know we're on our way back and tell them to hold on," Captain Lee said. The Asimov could more than hold her own against other ships, even with one cannon missing, but Neve could not bring herself to fire on the last light. She hoped the boarding party would be small in number, and so it was, only 3 Malnid. Neve could see they were hindered by the higher gravity, moving slowly and struggling with the weight of their armor and weapons. She had decided it would be better to make the conditions difficult for them, knowing their reactions and fighting ability would be impaired. Taking a deep breath, Neve sprinted from her hiding place, trying to move as lightly as possible on her feet, hoping the helmets would mask her approach. As she reached them, the one in the back began to turn, just as she drove her shoulder into it, sending it flying against the other 2, and the pile hit the wall with a satisfying crunch, dropping their weapons. She tumbled to the floor but righted herself quickly, reaching for the closest rifle and aiming it at the pile of Malnid. But the weapon remained mute as she pressed the trigger. In a panic, she quickly swung the rifle at the head of the nearest Malnid and felt the impact as it went down. She looked at the other 2, but paused when she saw the blood running from their elongated snouts. The combination of her size and the added gravity had the effect she was hoping for when she got the idea after seeing what happened to First Heddick when she bumped into him. She paused to take a breath and tried to control her shaking. She gave a quick thanks to her father for insisting that she play hockey growing up. Not too many parents would threaten their kids with losing their time for study if they didn't play sports. She still wasn't sure how many more there were, though, or even what she would do, even if she could stop them all. The Asimov and all her friends were dead. Could she even get home? Pushing those thoughts to the back for the time being, She took another deep breath and rubbed her shoulder. She was going to hurt a lot more after this was done. "Brace yourselves. This is likely to be a rough ride," Pearson cautioned as she brought the Asimov to an abrupt halt against the hull of the last light. Shu and her team gripped the handles in the airlock as the impact reverberated through the ship. "Apologies for the jarring landing, Shu, but we must catch that vessel before it escapes. If the situation exceeds your team's capabilities, establish a defensive position and inform us. We'll return to provide assistance," Captain Lee said over the comm. "We're ready, Captain. Good luck with the pursuit. We'll see you soon," Shu replied as she led the 8-member boarding party through the airlock into the last light. The door closed behind them, and she watched the Asimov accelerate in pursuit of the Malnid ship. "All right, Warner, you'll take B Team. A Team is with me. Our priorities are the safety of the Rothla and Neve, and ensuring all of you return safely. Shoot on sight, but be mindful of your firing lanes. We don't know the enemy's numbers, so stay with your assigned teams," Shu instructed with calm precision. While only she and Warner had prior military experience, the other team members were competent. There was no room for the timid in the vastness of space. Still, Shu would have preferred a fully trained military unit at her disposal rather than part-time personnel. Like Warner, she had served in the military on Earth. Shu was the only child of her middle-class parents, and her physical attributes had opened doors that her country's intense academic competition had not. As the team split up, she checked her rifle and backup sidearm, then adjusted the knife strapped to her thigh. The Malnid were about to finally meet a human soldier. Neve was no soldier. Her heart crashed inside her as she crept through the corridors. The initial rush of adrenaline had worn off, and now she had to work hard to push her fear down. She waited as the Malnid came around the corner and swung the rifle, catching the lead soldier full in the face and dropping him as she rushed the other two, hoping to drive them into the floor with her mass. Her shoulder caught one, but the last Malnid was further away than she had expected, and a light flashed past her face as she fell on top of the second Malnid. Neve struck out blindly with her foot and felt something give, even as she pushed herself to her feet and ran away. Another flash behind her let her know at least one of the Malnid were still alive. Neve stopped in a corridor to catch her breath, and the ship shuddered again. She was tired and her body was starting to ache even more. She wished she had spent more time with Shu training back on the Asimov. She proceeded cautiously through the halls and then heard another group just as they rounded the corner. She turned and desperately sprinted away down the hall as they spotted her, racing to the junction. As she slowed down to make the turn, lights flashed down the hallway, and one caught her on her thigh, sending her sprawling hard into the wall. Pain exploded in her leg. She dragged herself to her feet, leaning on her rifle. She knew she couldn't outrun them anymore, and looked for a place to hide. "Enough of this," the alien in the front growled, baring its fangs. "Put down your weapon, and perhaps we will grant you a merciful end. If you refuse, you will know the cold terror of pain and suffering before you die." From behind the bed, Neve looked up at the ceiling, trying to discern which parts of her body were unharmed. There was no other way out of the room. She wondered what Captain Lee might do in this situation. "Apologies, but I'm Canadian. You can't threaten me with the cold," she shouted defiantly. The Asimov closed the distance with the last Malnid ship. They had not gained the same head start as the other vessel, and Lieutenant Pearson's hard docking had saved them some time. "We need that ship intact, Commander. Cannons only, aim for their engines, and let's hope we don't hit anything too explosive. Mr. Singh, inform me immediately if Shu's team requires our assistance," said Captain Lee. Commander Mathis worked the targeting controls and waited for the range indicator. As it beeped, he began firing bursts from the remaining cannon. The tracer rounds illuminated the view screen as the Malnid ship desperately tried to evade the Asimov. Its own pulse cannons returned fire, shaking the Asimov with each hit, but small explosions ripped across its stern. The Malnid ship suddenly lurched to the side, gases spewing from its stern. Lights across the ship began flickering as it listed awkwardly and began rolling over. "Nice shooting, Commander," Captain Lee said. The commander turned to flash a broad grin, which seemed even brighter against his dark skin. "Captain," Peterson calmed, "we can't take much more of that. I'm detecting hull damage in a few places, and we've lost a few systems. Those shots are starting to add up. Acknowledged, the captain replied. He looked at the crippled ship on the screen. Commander, if you even get a sense they're going to put up any more fight, end them. Malneed ship, this is Captain Lee of the starship Asimov. You will power down all your systems except your life support. Any other action will result in the destruction of your vessel. There are no other terms. Seconds passed, then a rough voice came over the comm. The Malnid do not. The rest was cut off by more explosions as Commander Mathis fired another burst from the cannon. Those seemed like fighting words, sir, Mathis said, keeping his eyes on the targeting screen. Chaos could be heard over the open comm channel. Then the Malnid ship went dark as it began powering down. They had captured their prey. Their prey was trapped in the room. They had chased it through the corridors and were exhausted. His team was working hard in the high gravity, and Officer Nagan felt the heat in his armor as he panted to cool himself. The rest of the boarding crew were instructed to make their way to his position. The cowards on the Snarl had abandoned them, and now this one alien was defeating his soldiers. He had felt the blood rise in him when he spotted the creature and brought it down with his rifle. As they had rounded the corner, he had expected it to be dead. Instead, it had survived the shot and had made it to the room. They had advanced cautiously, having seen the remains of their comrades in the corridors. He had offered it a quick death, but the thing had yelled out something his translator could not interpret. As he pondered what a Canadian might be, his comm erupted in noise. Shoot them! Where are they? I think I got one. Fall back! Fall back! What are they wearing? Leave the wounded. Then behind them, 5 Malnid soldiers lumbered around the corner in a frenzied mess. The last one in the group suddenly dropped before he could make the turn, as his armor exploded out of one side of his body. Officer Nagan had not seen any pulse flashes, but the walls in the corridor erupted in fragments. They are coming! One of the soldiers screamed as he crashed into Officer Nagan's group. He slapped the coward and pushed him aside. Take positions. When they approach, engage the enemy, Officer Nagan ordered. The soldiers fell back on their training and formed a defensive line. Officer Nagan could hear the strained panting over his comms and sense the fear. He had not witnessed his soldiers in this state before. They were behaving like untested recruits. They had boarded the ship expecting to face a small crew of timid Rothla. Then they encountered a massive alien, and now something had managed to unnerve his soldiers. They were unprepared for this. What had these Rothla discovered? A limbed form appeared briefly down the hallway, and 2 small canisters rolled down the corridor. The Malnid soldiers scrambled to avoid the unknown weapons. Officer Nagan shouted at them to find cover, but just as he spoke, his world flashed white, and a ringing sound filled his ears. He fired blindly down the hall in anger, hoping to strike back at the foe. A sudden sharp pain erupted in his chest, and he fell to the ground, dropping his rifle. As seconds passed, his vision slowly returned, and he heard muffled cracks through his impaired hearing. Dazed, he looked around at his soldiers, some dead or dying, as the room continued to spin. Finally, the noises ceased, and he saw the blurred forms of the enemy approaching. A booted foot kicked his rifle away. Officer Nagan could only pant heavily as the taste of blood filled his mouth. This one still lives, Toby said over the comm. Disarm him, but leave him be. He is not our priority, Shu replied without emotion. Shu watched the alien rifle skitter away, keeping an eye on the injured alien. She would admit to few that she took a certain satisfaction in seeing her foes defeated. She harbored no sympathy for those who chose to take up arms against her. She turned her attention to the end of the hallway where Neve was struggling to get to her feet. Secure this area. Warner, we're on level 2. We found Neve. We have 12 bad guys down. What's your status? She said. We found the Rothla by engineering. First Hedek and Varro are still missing. Chalk up 3 space wolves for us. Mathers took a hit because stupidity, but he'll recover. Warner replied. Shut up, Warner. No one told me we were fighting hairy alien dwarves. Mathers calmed. Save it for later. Lock down there and hold that position until further notice, she said. Shoo! Neve yelled as she reached the room. I thought you were dead. First Hedek said you were gone. I thought he meant we had to cut loose so we could fight, but you know we'd never leave you. By the way, the gravity, was that you? Shu asked. Neve nodded. Good thinking. I noticed it shortly after we boarded. The Malnid looked like they were walking through water. We spotted a group running somewhere in a hurry. They led us right here. Shu helped Neve sit on the bed. Are you hurt badly? I don't think anything is broken, it's just really painful, Neve replied, clutching Shu tightly to her. Dr. Chan will fix you right up. Varro, we need to get Dr. Chan here. She's hurt, she's lost a lot of blood, Neve said. I'll relay that to the ship. Where is she? They're in a control room on this level. I'll have to show you. I can walk if you help me, Neve said, struggling to get up. Easy now. A-Team, we've got an escort mission now. Give me a perimeter for our package here. First person to let anything through. Scrubs the outside of the ship for a month. Let's move, Shu said. Can you move it? Dr. Chan asked as he held Neve's leg. Only if I say ow, 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 she replied through gritted teeth. First Hedek looked on with concern. He had seen to his crew and wanted to make sure the brave human that saved them was safe. They were currently back in Bay 2 where the humans had set up their equipment. Warner stood guard near them. They had thoroughly searched the ship, but stayed alert in case any Malnid had hidden themselves away. In total, 18 Malnid were found. 1 surrendered, and the rest were subdued without much difficulty. They were simply outmatched by the armored humans in the high gravity. I believe you'll be limping for a bit, but otherwise, no permanent harm. You were fortunate it only grazed you. Otherwise, it may have fractured your pelvis. You'll need to take it easy for a while, Dr. Chan said. How is Varro? Neve asked. She's stable as far as I can tell. You can see her again once I'm finished here. The gash was unsightly, but once we stopped the bleeding, I stitched her up. I'm uncertain if Rothla scar like we do, but if they do, she'll have a rather impressive one to regale her friends with stories, Dr. Chan replied. I need to see her, Neve said. You will, but Neve, we have another issue. You were exposed to them and the Malnid without your suit. I don't know what will happen to you, or to them. You'll have to stay here for a while until we can run a full diagnostic, and then you'll still need to undergo some rather unpleasant decontamination procedures, followed by a quarantine before you can return to the Asimov, I'm afraid, Dr. Chan said. First Hedek looked at the doctor, puzzled. Doctor, is that why you wear your suits? We thought it was simply a custom of your species, or perhaps because you found our atmosphere inhospitable. We do not think you have anything to worry about. We carry standard biological inhibitors on board. All Rothla have them. What do you mean? Dr. Chan asked. Our people and every other species are able to freely mix as long as our environments permit us using the inhibitors. They protect us from foreign elements once programmed with the host species library of known bacteria and viruses. It's a very old technology, First Hedek said. I'm going to need you to get me a few of those devices, but it's going to take some time before we can use it. We'll get it to the R&D guys and put a rush on it, but until then, Neve, this is your home, Dr. Chan said, packing up his equipment. Warner approached Neve. Listen, Neve, no offense, but if you come back to the ship and give me some kind of space illness that causes any of my necessary parts to fall off, we're going to have words. And just to be clear, I need all the parts I currently have. Neve aimed a kick at his armored leg, immediately regretting her choice of limbs to strike. Varro looked at Neve, who she had never seen outside her suit before. The fur on Neve's head was long and tied up behind her. It was hard to believe this human had been able to hold off the Malnid with no fangs or claws, using only a rifle as a club. Neve, you did not tell me you were a warrior, Varro said. I'm not. Shu and Warner are. I take care of navigation, Neve replied. They were in First Hedek's quarters, where the extra space had given the doctor more room to work, as First Hedek had insisted. But I heard what happened. How could you do that to the Malnid if you are not a warrior? Varro asked. High gravity and the right motivation, I guess, Neve replied, holding Varro's paw. Varro felt the human's soft skin, yet these same hands had killed Malnid. Why were you not afraid, Neve? Do humans not feel fear? Is that why humans are good at war? Varro asked. Of course we feel fear. I was very afraid, at least until I saw Shu, but I was more afraid of what would happen to you, Neve replied. This human stood taller than him, though not the largest he had encountered, Their weapons officer was even more imposing. But Malnid was still Malnid, and he summoned his courage. "Your ship, this Asimov, was he a great warrior of your people?" he asked. "No," replied the alien. "He was a writer, a scientist, and a dreamer. He wrote of where humanity could go and what we might achieve among the stars. This ship, like the Le Guin, was built to help humans explore the galaxy, inspired by those who urged us to look up and find our place in the universe. Then your writers and dreamers will not save you, for the Malnid Empire shall rise to meet you," Palat growled defiantly. "You may find that the pen is mightier than the sword. We fared well against you in this writer's ship," the alien said, gesturing toward the front of the bridge. Palat turned, and the fur on his spine stood on end as the massive 5,000-foot-long ESA Vanguard slowly slid over the snarl, like an armored serpent uncoiling its impossibly long body. The formidable gun placements on its hull made it clear that humans did not trifle with war. "First Hedek," Captain Lee said as he entered, stifling an urge to pick up the alien and squeeze it. "I'm sorry to have kept you. We had to secure the Malnid ship, and Admiral Jenkins wanted a debrief. My superiors also wanted an accounting of the damage to the Asimov." "Of course, Captain. I understand. We are grateful for everything you have done. I can ask for nothing more from you," First Hedek replied. "Have you managed to contact your people?" Captain Lee asked. "Not yet, but Niman tells me your Peterson is a talented engineer, so we hope to have it fixed shortly. They have been focused on getting the engines running. Captain, I owe you an explanation about the Malnid." Captain Lee interrupted him. "You ran into a Malnid patrol and tried to escape. The Last Light is not exactly a completely legal operation. Not anything too illegal, but under Malnid rules, you had some tolls and taxes you hadn't paid. Sometimes you carry cargo you shouldn't be carrying, and you don't always register your flight plans. You are known to the Malnid in this sector, and you have an unspoken arrangement with them. Sometimes you pay, sometimes you don't, but usually they don't really care as long as you pay more often than not. Varro, she is the sole survivor of a colony wiped out by the Malnid, the one you found her at. The Malnid had claimed the colony was killed by unknown rogue elements, but Varro saw them. She knew they were part of the Malnid forces. Your trip to the colony wasn't registered. The Malnid may be bullies, but the galaxy is vast, and even they lack the strength to confront the other species should they unite. To catalyze such a unification, Varro is crucial. You saved the one Rothla who may change the galaxy."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.